evolution and natural selection. Boom, boom. Yes. Okay, so we have a whole session dedicated to evolution and natural selection. And these kinds of questions, they like to offer maybe like 3 or 4 marks actually when you're talking about explaining what natural selection is or these kinds of things. So what we'll want to do is that we want to go through our basic concepts. We also want to go through slightly bigger exam questions so you know what they are looking for when you're answering your papers, all right? So in particular, in evolution and natural selection, we're going to be going over biodiversity to start off, followed by variation. That's really important, both genetic and environmental. Then we're going to be talking about evolution, and then finally natural selection. Okay, so these are our 4 topics of the day. And what I'm going to do now is put up our first Slido interaction. So you guys probably already know the drill, but I'll look in details on the left-hand side of your screen. You can scan the QR code or go onto slido.com and type in the numbers just underneath that. So 513265. And all I want you guys to do is to rate how confident you feel with these topics. So biodiversity, variation, evolution, and natural selection. So I'll put this up for a minute or two just so everyone has the opportunity to log into Slido, get used to it, etc. Find where the Q&A box is so you can write your questions in, okay? And also at the same time, guys, don't worry too much if you can't get access to logging into Slido right now. Every time we have a Slido interaction, our login details will be on the left-hand side of our screen. So don't get too bogged down by that. And this is also a great time for me to see how many have joined us today. So for all those that are signing in and voting, welcome. I'll personalize my welcomes a bit more when we get to our quiz questions. All right, I'll give you guys 1 more minute just so you guys have the opportunity to log on, and then we will go into what we are learning today. All right, 30 more seconds, guys. But so far, roughly, we have an average of 3.7. So you guys are relatively okay with this. Okay, relatively okay. Probably need a bit more practice just to make sure you're going over everything. And this is a good rating because we have a lot of questions in this section. So get ready to have fingers on buzzers, guys. Nice. Thank you guys so much for voting on that. And we are going to go into the specifics of the learning objectives we're covering today. So these are the ones we're covering. So regarding biodiversity, we're going to be understanding what it is, as well as the factors affecting it, and understanding predator-prey relationships. Okay, that's actually really important. There's a particular graph associated with it, which you guys might know or might not know. And it's really important to know how to interpret this graph. Okay. Then regarding variation, we're going to be understanding what that is. And then we're going to be really breaking down genetic causes, because we understand that when we're talking about certain genetic causes of variation, this can be where some people get confused. So we really want to take some time and break that down, followed by environmental causes of variation and their interaction. Okay. And finally, we'll be understanding evolution and natural selection. So let's start off and let's get into it. My first question for you guys today what is an ecosystem? Is it a group of organisms of one species? Is it all the living and non-living things that interact in the area? Is it the study of the interaction between living organisms and their environments? Or is it soil, water, air, and sunlight? So what is an ecosystem, guys? All right, 30 more seconds, guys. Let's get those answers flying in, and let's see what you guys think an ecosystem is. Okay. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I do not know why 1 was my pinky, but I'm sure you guys understand. So, what is an ecosystem? Lovely. Yes, lovely. So 62% of you got that correct. So an ecosystem is essentially all of the living and non-living things that interact in an area. Okay, so our second answer is actually referring to the study of ecology. So the study of the interaction between living organisms and their environments is ecology. So this is what an ecosystem is. So we're off to a flying start. Well done, folks. So this is what you guys have rightly defined. So the organisms in a particular area, as well as living and non-living. Now, in this ecosystem, this will include two key phrases that we need to know and understand the difference between. We first have our habitats, okay? So that's just a place where an organism lives, all right? And then we have our communities. So that is all of the living organisms that live within a habitat, okay? So let's say, for instance, we have our wonderful pond area over here, okay? So this will be our ecosystem, perhaps, right? So it describes our organisms that are in our particular area as well as non-living components. So in this pond area, you might find mayflies, you might find dragonflies, you might find maybe the odd sea creature. If it's a freshwater lake, maybe you'd find just some small fishes moving about, etc. Okay, now on the banks, maybe you'll find a little area that our duck family would like to live in. Okay, so that would be its habitat. Okay, so a duck would live on the banks of a pond. All right, but even though a duck lives on the banks of the pond, so when I'm talking about the banks, I just mean the edges of the pond. All right, so that is the bank of a pond. Right. So even though our ducks live on the bank of a pond, you will have other organisms that live within that bank, all right? So you might find your dragonflies, you might find your mayflies, and even our small insects as well, okay? You'll also probably find some plants living there as well, as we can see here, okay? You might find some pondweed, all of this kind of stuff. So this is how these three key terms interact. And so you're going to need to remember these key terms because I'm sure in an exam they could easily ask you what is a habitat, okay? And if they don't ask you what a habitat is, they'll probably want to include it in an exam answer, okay? Because it is one of those keywords. Now, moving on from habitats, we are going to define biodiversity, which is essentially the range of different animals and plants that live in a given habitat. All right, so we have our example here. Now, rainforests are great examples for when we're talking about biodiversity because they have millions, and I cannot stress this enough, millions of different species, okay? So, of course, you will have your big mammals, maybe your jaguars, etc., your pumas, and then you'll also have maybe your capybaras, you'll have your reptiles, your alligators, crocodiles, as well as your smaller insects as well. And of course, you'll have your plants as well. So your massive trees, flowers, all of these kinds of things. And because it has so many different species, we can say that it is greatly diverse. Okay, so that is what biodiversity is monitoring. It's not monitoring the number of one type of species, it's monitoring the different range of species. Okay, so this is a key part if you guys don't already know this. An area with a large population does not necessarily mean it is biodiverse. Okay, if you go to a farm that has a very large population of sheep, that's not necessarily biodiverse. Sure, it has a whole load of sheep, but it has nothing else. Okay, maybe you'll have like some grass in the corner that that your sheep can munch on, etc. But there isn't a range of different species. So the biodiversity of that sheep farm would probably be quite low. Okay. So we're looking at this box here. Okay. So this is a key part that I think you guys will probably need to know and also just have clear in your head. Because sometimes when people think about this, they do get a bit confused when they're talking about large populations. So an area with a large population but low variety will have low biodiversity. Okay, so the thing that makes biodiversity is the range of variety. So low variety, low biodiversity. High variety, high biodiversity. Okay. Now, also another key word here, we have our species at the top of our slide here. All right. So a species is essentially a group of organisms that are able to interbreed to produce fertile offspring. Of course, we have our example of a horse, for instance. Okay. So horse plus horse will make another horse. All right. But horse plus donkey will make a mule. But the problem with the mule is that it is not fertile. Okay. And since it's not fertile, we cannot conclude that a horse and a donkey is part of the same species. They're different species, okay? Because the offspring that they produce, a mule, is not fertile. So this is a key word to know. Remember, a species, a group of organisms that are able to interbreed to produce fertile offspring. Think of the example of the horse, the donkey, and the mule, okay? So those are some key definitions down. So now we have questions. Which area is likely to have more biodiversity? A cornfield, a forest, or a car park? Which one do we think has more biodiversity? Nice, answers are flying in. 30 more seconds, guys. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's see what you guys have said. Beautiful, yes. So a forest is definitely likely to have more biodiversity because you will have multiple organisms relying on each other in this single environment, and it's largely undisturbed. So it is likely to have a wide variety of different species. In comparison to a car park that has been concreted over, it's very unlikely that you'll have any kinds of species there, except of course the humans that drive their cars, maybe a dog, etc. But they do not live in that car park. Maybe you'll have some dandelions that are trying to break through the concrete, etc., but it is still quite unlikely. And of course, with cornfields, even though there'll probably be so many different corn plants, it's still only one type of species of corn. So it will have low biodiversity. Now, based on that, let's answer this question. Complete the statement. When there is higher biodiversity, which one of these is correct? More organisms are likely to die because they can't adapt to environmental changes. There's less diversity. There's more diversity and higher sustainability of life, or there's more diversity and lower sustainability of life. Okay, so we have to complete this statement. Where there is higher biodiversity, what do we think will happen? All right, 30 more seconds, guys. 15 more seconds. What do we think happens when there's higher biodiversity? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, let's see what you guys have said. Beautiful. Yes. So, as you guys have rightly said, and as you guys have picked, when there is higher biodiversity, there is more diversity, okay? And where there is more diversity, there is a higher sustainability of life. Now, that second part is important, having a higher sustainability of life because it's more diverse, okay? Because that particular ecosystem or that particular area relies on multiple different kinds of species to survive. Therefore, it's more likely that that place will survive. If one area relied on only one kind of species to survive, if anything happened to that singular species, that area would not have a very good outcome, all right? It is very risky to have one area that only relies on one kind of species. So, as you guys rightly said, higher biodiversity means more diversity and higher sustainability of life. So, well done. Yes. So, this is exactly what we have been saying earlier. Okay. So, when you have an ecosystem with higher biodiversity, you will have fewer species that actually depend on one another. Will actually have fewer species that depend on one another for food, shelter, and maintaining their environment. Okay. Now, this sounds a bit counterintuitive, but hear me out. Okay. So what I'm saying is that, say for instance, if a predator had more than one prey, your ecosystem is going to be more stable because they can easily adjust to changes. All right. So, say we are in the savannah and we are looking at a wonderful lion here who has a diet of a zebra. Okay. Now, if we had an area with low biodiversity and it was literally just zebras, right, roaming around the place, that ecosystem would be very unstable. Why? Because if you have a lot of lions only eating zebra, it's likely that that species will die out or have a severely reduced number, which means then that the systems in that ecosystem that relied on that zebra would no longer be as strong. Why? Because there are fewer zebra around. Now, I'm not going to draw it, but I'm just going to write the name down. Antelopes, right? Now, we have a population of antelopes that's been introduced into our savanna, okay? Lions also like to eat antelopes. So, now you have more than one source of prey. which means that lions can now pick if they wanted zebra, if they wanted antelope. Now, this means that it's less likely for one species to have their numbers depleted because now lions have choice, which means that they won't hunt one to near extinction. All right. So ecosystems with higher biodiversity will have fewer species that depend on one another for food, shelter, and maintaining their environments, which, as you guys rightly said, means that if you have higher biodiversity, you will have more sustainability of life. All right, so well done, folks. Now, biodiversity of an ecosystem can be affected by so many things. All right, our primary one is this: competition for resources. As they say, it's a dog eat dog world out there, right? Everyone's competing for resources, even our animals. So we will delve a bit more into competition for resources, all right? But other ones that you need to be aware of are, of course, disease, all right? If you have one disease that wipes out one particular species, that will, of course, reduce your biodiversity. If you have a disease that somehow wipes out multiple different kinds of species, well, of course, that's going to be even worse, right? And then finally, we have the number of predators. Now, we will also explore this when we're talking about our predator-prey relationship, all right? So we're just going to hold fire on that for now. But the first thing that we are going to explore is the competition for resources, okay? So we have our poll here. So two fox families are fighting over the same den, okay? What would we class that as an example of? Interspecific competition or intraspecific competition? What do we think, guys? This one's a bit different because now you can see what everyone is voting for. But just because everyone's voting for it doesn't not necessarily mean it is correct. I just want to see what you guys think. So you have two fox families are fighting over the same den. I'm letting you guys know now. Just because that's green, it doesn't mean that that is the correct answer. It just means that this is what the majority of people have voted for. Just letting you know. All right, 30 more seconds. Okay, so two fox families fighting over the same den. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's see if our correct answer comes up. Oh, no, it does not. Okay, so this is what you guys have voted for. So two fox families fighting over the same den. All right. So I'm going to say now that 77% of you are incorrect. Sorry, guys. This is not an example of interspecific competition. This is actually an example of intra-specific competition. So well done to the 21% of you that voted correctly, okay? So this is a thing of definitions, and this is what we're going to hash over on our next slide. So well done, folks, for voting, and I'm going to let you guys know what these individual words mean, okay? So we have interspecific competition and we have intraspecific competition. Okay? So interspecific competition occurs between individuals of different species, okay? In comparison, intraspecific competition occurs between individuals of the same species, which is why for our previous question, where we had two fox families fighting over the same den, these are the same species, therefore it's an example of intra-specific competition, okay? Competition between individuals of the same species. Now, in my mind, the way that I like to remember this is kind of getting my chemistry hat on, because we have intramolecular bonds and we have intermolecular bonds. Our intramolecular bonds, you know, are our covalent, our ionic, our metallic, and our intermolecular bonds are those weaker bonds between molecules, all right? So that's kind of how I like to remember it. But of course, if you guys have another way of trying to remember interspecific versus intraspecific, do let us know and we'll let the class know. You can put it in the Q&A and then people will vote it up and then I can let the whole class know. All right. So remember, interspecific competition is it occurs between individuals of different species. Okay. Let's say, for instance, you have a fox and a cat. All right. This is very urban, but this face-off can really happen. All right. Especially in London where foxes are roaming. You can have foxes and cats fighting for the same territory. This is an example of interspecific competition. In comparison, you have same species, fox and fox. All right. So keep those two in mind, and well done, folks, for voting on that. So now we've talked about species competition. What we're going to be talking about now are competition for resources, okay? So this normally happens when resources are in short supply. And we have 4 key resources that we compete for, okay? So the first one I'm sure that you guys probably already know is food, all right? Followed by, of course, sunlight. Now this in particular is something that plants like to fight for, okay? Especially because plants, they can't really move around as much because, you know, they're very much firmly rooted into the soil. So plants like to compete for sunlight either by growing the tallest, having the largest spread of leaves so the sun can touch all of these areas, etc. And sometimes the fight can be vicious. Right, we then have water. This is, of course, a thing for both animals and plants, all kinds of organisms, where you need to compete for a water source because water is life. And then finally, space, which I used in my example previously when defining the difference between interspecific and intraspecific competition. 2 fox families fighting over the same den is a competition for space, okay? Because maybe that's the only den that they have in a 100-kilometer diameter, all right? They're not going to be traveling 100 more kilometers to try and find another den. They want that den in that space and they want it now. So these are our 4 main places where competition can happen, especially where resources are in short supply. Now we're going to delve a bit more into starting to think about predators and prey, all right? So in an ideal ecosystem, when there is a balance, when our ecosystem is in balance, okay, so there is ample resources, so there's good amount of food, there's good amount of light, good amount of space, and a good amount of water, okay? So if our ecosystem didn't really have a lot of competition in that sense, you will have the numbers of predators and prey remaining relatively constant, okay? Now, like we said, how I said earlier, when an ecosystem is in balance, that would mean that there's reduced competition. That's what happens when an ecosystem is in balance. But like we saw previously with the competition for resources, etc., it's going to be competition that can change the numbers of predators and prey, all right? Now, we like to separate these kinds of factors into abiotic and biotic factors, All right. So abiotic regards non-living elements. Okay. So when you have that prefix of a, that normally means no. Okay. It might actually be from maybe something like Latin or something. So when you see this part, a bio, we know that biology, the study of life, organisms, etc. So we know that we're talking about living elements, right? Now, if so here, put the a in front of it, this means abiotic, which means non-living elements. In comparison, we have bio, which is life, which we are discussing our living elements. So really, when we're talking about abiotic and biotic factors, all we're doing is separating out those factors that might affect competition into either living or non-living elements. So remember with our previous resources that might be in short supply, we talked about food, water, light, and space. Okay. Now, water, light, and space would come under our non-living elements. Okay. So we have water, light, and space. In comparison, our living elements would, for example, be food. Because let's be real, in the wild, when we have organisms eating, etc., why these are all living things that they're eating. So when we're talking about living elements, we're really discussing food, so plants, etc. Okay, so this is the distinction that I want you guys to make. So now we're going to delve more into this graph that I was talking about when we're considering the balance between our predator and prey relationship. Okay, so question for you guys. When predator numbers decrease, prey numbers will what? Increase, decrease, stay the same, or divide in half? Because fewer of them are being consumed. What do we think will happen? So when predator numbers decrease, prey numbers will what? Because fewer of them are being consumed. All right, 30 more seconds, guys. What will happen when predator numbers decrease? Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's see what you guys have said. Lovely. Okay. Yes. So when predator numbers will decrease, their prey numbers will increase because fewer of them are being consumed. All right. So we're going to see that in a graphical form because this might also be something that comes up in your exams. All right. So this is the graph that we're talking about when we're talking about our predator-prey relationship. All right. So on our x-axis, we have time. On our y-axis, we have population size. All right. So whenever they show these kinds of graphs, it might not actually be color coded in your exams, especially if they print in black and white. I'm so sorry, guys. But you can tell what line on your graph is either predator or prey, depending on the way that they look. All right. So there's some key features here. Looking at our predator line and looking at our prey line, okay? There will always, almost always be more prey than predator, okay? Generally speaking, there is almost always more prey than predator. Why? Because we're gonna draw a fox here, right? This is going to be our humble fox. And then we are going to be drawing rabbits. I'm so sorry, guys, but you guys get the drift. So these are going to be rabbits. Use your imagination. Right, so foxes are going to be the predators in this situation. Okay, why? Because they will be eating our prey, which typically eats plants, etc. They're typically herbivores, right? So one fox might have the ability in a day or two to eat 2 or 3 rabbits, all right? So you need to make sure that there are always a high amount of prey to feed the appetite, essentially, of a smaller population of predators, because one fox can eat 3 or 4 rabbits, all right? So this is just a proportional thing. There will always be more prey than predators, all right? Now, what you will always find also is that regarding prey, an interesting characteristic of their line is that when their population size fluctuates, it fluctuates greatly, all right? Now, let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, let's compare this predator line versus this prey line. This prey line, literally, okay, so if we have 10 up here and 2, okay? So we're saying population size per 1,000 in this small area. So at one point, we can have the population of rabbits in this example being 10,000. But in a very short period of time, you might find that it drops significantly down to 2,000. All right. So we see these significant steep variations in prey numbers. In comparison, predator numbers, when they fluctuate, they don't actually fluctuate by as much, all right? So we'll say that this is a 4. So in comparison with fox numbers, it might fluctuate between 2,000 and 4,000, all right? So maybe its peak will be 4,000, its bottom part will be 2,000. But you can see there's not as much variation in compared to the prey numbers, aka the rabbit numbers. So there's a steep amount of difference. So these are the 2 ways that you can identify what line is prey and what line is predator when you're looking at a predator-prey relationship graph. Number 1, there's always more prey than predators. And number 2, prey normally have a steep fluctuation in population size compared to predators, which remain relatively more constant. Okay, so as you guys had rightly shown in our previous question, when the number of prey increases, as we see here, oh, wait, no. Right. Okay, so when the number of prey increases, we'll start at the beginning of our slide, we will see that our number of predators increase. So reasons why the number of prey can increase, maybe they've had a good mating season and a lot of so we'll use the example of rabbits and foxes, all right? So the rabbits have had a good mating season. A lot of the baby rabbits that have been born have survived into adulthood, all right? So this is going to increase the population size, happy days. Also because there is a good amount of resources about, aka there's a good amount of food, water, space, and sunlight. So you'll find that the prey's population size increases because there's enough resources to accommodate this big amount of rabbits. Now, because there's a lot of resources that can accommodate a big amount of rabbits, this means that foxes now have a good food source, okay? Now, if foxes have a better food source, this means that they will eat more, which means that they will have more energy to then put into their next mating season, which means that you'll get more baby foxes, all right? And so what you'll find is as follows. You will also find a predator population increase as well as after the prey population increase, right? Now, say for instance, all of a sudden the food source for rabbits have dried up. Maybe the grass is not looking as green as it used to, and the rabbits do not have anything else to eat. Okay, so what would happen is that the population of rabbits would decrease. Why? Because there's not enough resources to accommodate their numbers. So some rabbits would, of course, die out for lack of food. Sad times. So what you might find is that you'll have their prey numbers significantly decrease. You'll have the rabbits' numbers significantly decrease. Now, this is going to have a knock-on effect of the predators, which is summarized in this box here. Because when your prey decreases, so your predators will decrease. Why? Because predators don't have their food source anymore. Rabbits can't eat grass, so they sadly will die out because they have no food. And because you don't have enough rabbits, the foxes will slowly die out because they don't have their food. And so you'll also find a slow decrease in the predator numbers, okay? So this is essentially a predator-prey relationship graph. I think once you look at this graph often enough, you will get used to the differences between the two. One thing I wanted to make you guys know about though, in exams, something that confused me a lot, but I want to tell you guys now, if you've never done a predator-prey relationship question in an exam, this is for you guys, right? So when you go into an exam, the graphs won't look as smooth as this. I'll let you know. They will not look as smooth as this. What you might find instead is just peaks and troughs, okay? So it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll go down, it'll go up, it'll look like this, okay? But regardless, this is still your prey line, okay? Because they will have a smaller, because they'll have a line that accommodates for a lower population size that might look a bit like this, okay? Bear in mind, there might also be a bit of overlap, so don't get too stressed out by that. So what I would advise all of you guys to do is, even though I've shown you guys what this predator-prey relationship looks like in principle, go through an exam question where you can see what the graph will look like. So when you go into an exam, you're not just like, oh my gosh, what is this? I don't recognize this, okay? Because it's still a predator-prey relationship graph, but it's just that it's a bit more spiky. But the same principles do apply, okay? Because in this chaos that you see on the screen, the yellow line still has roughly a lower population size than our green line, okay? And what you can also see is that compared to our yellow line, the green line also has steeper dips, okay? Steeper dips. And this is, of course, still corresponding to that pattern that we see in prey population size over time. So one thing I want you guys to take away from this is to look at an exam question that has a predator-prey relationship graph so that you guys are familiar with how it might look in an exam setting, okay? So we now have our famed quiz. Okay, what I need you guys to do, type in a username that you guys want to be known by, and this will come up on our leaderboard at the end of each quiz session. All right, so I'll give you guys a bit to, of course, create your usernames. And also for those that haven't done so already, this is also some good times to load up Slido and to log in. right. I'll give you guys one more minute. I'm going to use this time to say hello to some of you guys. So hello, Shakira, one of the first ones on my screen, as well as Shreya, Arush, Mike, Rain, Nick and Corey, Ramaz, Rory, Dora, Kani, Tom, Krisha, Ahil, Egbert, Moyo, Coco, Kawaja, Shrey, Willow, Emily, Vortex, Blackpink in your area, and Super Vegetable 3.0. Hello to all of you guys. Angel, Janaki, Maya, Rajashri. I'm probably missing a few, but if I have missed your name, I'm so sorry. But hello to all of you guys. All right, so if you guys haven't been to an Elite Medic sessions before, this is how you gain points. Number one, you gain points by answering the question correctly. And I would ideally say you prioritize answering the question correctly, okay? Another way that you can climb up the leaderboard is answering quickly, all right? So you guys have to answer correctly and answer quickly. So fingers on buzzers, guys. First question up in 3, 2, 1. Boom. True or false? Removing a top predator from an ecosystem is always a good thing for the prey that live there. Thought I'd start off with a nice true-false question. Got a 50% chance of getting this correct. So what do we think, guys? All right, 30 more seconds. True or false? Removing a top predator from an ecosystem is always a good thing for the prey that live there. Do we think this is correct? Do we think it is not? 15 more seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, let's see what you guys have said. Ho! I always love when this happens. Look at that split. 54% have said true, 46% have said false. Okay, so removing a top predator from an ecosystem is always a good thing for the prey that live there. Okay, so I'll flash up the answer and then I'll explain. So the correct answer is false. Yes, so 46% of you got that correct. Well done. Okay, so let me explain why sadly this is not true. All right, so when you remove a top predator from an ecosystem, of course, the immediate benefit for the prey is that they're no longer getting eaten. That is the first immediate benefit, okay? So this is a good thing for the prey. They're not getting eaten, so they can live their lives, etc. And then, of course, they can move on and do whatever they want. I don't know, get a job or something. Right, but the problem is what happens in the long term, okay? So say we have an island, okay? An island that had both predator and prey. Now, this island had a good amount of resources. The prey would munch on the natural resources, maybe plants, etc. The predator would come and eat the prey. There was a balance. What then happens is if you remove that top predator, now the prey will, of course, have no predator, which means that they can easily multiply because this island that we have, for example, has good resources, right? So this prey will continue to multiply, continue to consume the resources of the island, etc. But one thing that might happen is overpopulation. Now, this island really relied on the good balance between prey and predator to make sure that the resources that they had, especially the food, stayed in a constant flow. If you have too much prey that is now eating, let's say, for instance, all of this grass, okay? Now there are a lot of mouths to feed in terms of prey, which means increasingly there'll be more and more competition for resources, okay? When there's more and more competition for resources, this can also have a negative impact on the prey. Because even though they now have a population increase because that top predator is gone, their food is now very scarce. So it's kind of like, okay, our top predator is gone, but at what cost, right? So sadly, this is false. So it's not always a good thing to remove a top predator from an ecosystem, because that top predator actually helps with population control. Now, I'm not saying this for all scenarios, but the important part is that this statement said that it's always a good thing, which it's not. Okay? So, well done to you folks that got that correct. Next question, fingers on buzzers in 3, 2, 1. Boom. What's a community? Several different populations scattered across several areas, several different organisms in the same geographic area, one type of organism in the same geographic area, or several different populations in the same geographic area. What is a community? All right, 30 more seconds, guys. What's a community? Fifteen more seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. What is a community? Ooh, okay. 59% said several different organisms in the same geographic area. Are you correct? Yes, you are. Well done. Yes. Okay. So our correct answer is here. A community is several different organisms in the same area. Okay. So the reason why 27% of you, sadly, that answer isn't correct, is because you can have multiple different populations of the same species, but you aren't necessarily accounting for every single organism that is in that same geographic area. Now, sadly, you guys got that wrong, but this is why biology, you really need to make sure you got your keywords down, okay? Especially when it comes to definitions, because what you'll find is that when you're defining something in an exam paper, they will have a separate section underneath that answer that says, do not accept this, do not accept that. And this is what we need to be really careful of, so we don't include words that are not accepted. So when we're talking about communities, there are several different organisms in the same geographic area. All right, so well done. Next question in 3, 2, 1. Which option is an abiotic factor? Plants, bacteria, water, or fungi? Now this one should be more straightforward. Let's get those answers flying in, guys. Which one of these is an abiotic factor? Okay, 30 more seconds, guys. 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's see what you guys have said. Right, 80% have picked water. And you are correct, yes. So an abiotic factor is a non-living element that can affect the differences between prey and predator populations, okay? It can affect the stability of an ecosystem as well as the competition, both interspecific and intraspecific, all right? So abiotic factors are non-living things. In comparison, plants, bacteria, and fungi are all living, all right? So well done. Final question in 3, 2, 1. What are some of the ways we can help in maintaining biodiversity? Getting involved in ecological restoration in your area, preventing invasive species from overpopulating, not using chemical pesticides on crops, or all of the above? So what are some ways we can help in maintaining biodiversity? Okay, 30 more seconds, guys. 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. Nice. 80% of you said all of the above, and you're correct. Yes. So these are some ways which we can help in maintaining biodiversity. Getting involved in ecological restoration is really cool. So, when you see things like creating those artificial beehives, or when you have those areas where they allow for wild flowers to be planted, so that can bring back, say, for instance, bees, wasps, all that kind of stuff, etc. Those are examples of ecological restoration. If you prevent invasive species from overpopulating, this is a great way of maintaining biodiversity, because invasive species are essentially species that grow in areas where they are not meant to grow. And what happens is that they use the resources in that area, and of course, as we see here, they overpopulate and then stifle the species that live in that area, okay? So if you prevent that from happening, you're going to maintain biodiversity. And of course, if you avoid chemical pesticides on crops, this means that you will maintain the insect population that might be buzzing around all of your crops, etc., which will maintain biodiversity. So well done, folks. So finally, here is our leaderboard. Don't worry, guys, this can all change in a second, but you guys are answering in record time. Wild. Grace, first off. Congratulations, 49 seconds, followed by Bing Chilling, 12 at 50 seconds. And then you have our Cheryong Stan at 55, followed by Potato at 101 and Taylor Swift at 104. And well done to all of you guys that are still getting 4 out of 4. I will tell you now, it is still all to play for, okay? But well done, all of you guys. So what I want you guys to do is just to rate how confident you guys feel with biodiversity now. Of course, if you guys still have any questions at all, please put that in the Slido Q&A, and then we'll be going over that a bit later. Okay.